Hi, thank you so much for joining our session, Zero Emissions Transport, with Michael Day from the Australian Electric Vehicle Association. Please add in the chat if you like your name or you're dialing in from and your favourite EV. We'd love to see. I'm Ursula Hogben, co-founder of Zero Emissions Sydney North. We've had a record number of bookings tonight. Thank you everyone so much for your interest in EVs. Speaking to you from the land of the Borryagal and Camaragal people, the traditional owners of the land, and I acknowledge and pay my respects to elders of the past, present, and those of the future, and acknowledge their spiritual connection to country. So why are we here tonight? We're here because we know electric vehicles are the way of the future. Here's our New South Wales Treasurer, Matt Keane. He's got a Tesla Model 3 and absolutely loves it. So tonight you'll hear from me briefly in relation to EV essential information. And then you'll hear from Michael Day, who is Chair, New South Wales and National Treasurer of the Australian Electric Vehicle Association. Michael's going to discuss his EV journey, the new New South Wales incentives saving us money on buying EVs, EVs available now, charging, and one of the ways of the future, bidirectional charging. And then we'll also have time for your questions. So who are we? Zero Emissions Sydney North is a volunteer group, and we're focused on practical ways to reduce emissions. What we found is many people say, I want to reduce emissions, what can I do? And we wanted to provide really practical, straightforward programs that focused on the main ways that we can reduce emissions. We're a part of the National Beyond Zero Emissions Network, and we particularly focus on northern beaches and the North Shore. And we provide programs and information sessions to schools, to businesses, to households. And if you have a look at our website, you'll see we've got case studies, we've got videos, we've got downloadable guides, we've got lots of information to make it really easy to know how to significantly reduce emissions. We also have a couple of business relationships who pay us thank you contributions. They go to our operations and they also go to our community giving fund. And we recently did our first charity solar installation on local charity Pioneer Clubhouse at Balgala. So we were really glad to be able to do that. I'll briefly go through some EV essential information and then we'll hear from Michael. So what are the main reasons people are buying EVs? We find there's basically three main reasons: financial, environmental and fun. So financially, EVs will save significant money, apart from the upfront cost, on petrol and on maintenance. So looking at the average amount that people drive, you're probably going to be saving maybe a couple of $1,000s a year on petrol, depending how much you drive and whether you've got solar at home to be able to do some of your charging from home. You should also find this, because there's significantly fewer moving parts, no spark plugs, oil filters, etc. There's far less to go wrong, and there should be significantly less maintenance costs and also maintenance and servicing time. Another really main reason that people are buying EVs, and a particular reason that we love, is environmental benefits. So if we all switch to electric transport, from planes, buses, through to cars, motorbikes, scooters, if all of us went from fossil fuel to electric transport in Australia, that alone would save 6% of Australia's emissions. Also, when you look at the impact of exhaust fumes, it's causing about 1,700 deaths a year in Australia and costing us about 3.3 billion in Australia. The kind of invisible effects of air pollution. But can you imagine if all of our transport was electrified we would be living in a significantly cleaner, greener, and quieter community. And then the last main reason people get EVs is just fun, sheer performance. And here we've got a couple of brief case studies, people telling us how they find their EV. So Dr. Kim Liu from Doctors for the Environment loves her Nissan Leaf, partly because it's pollution-free driving. And she notes the impact of Australian cars and high polluting fuels. Dr. Liu runs her car mostly from her rooftop solar, and she's saving significant amounts of money each year. And we have Jay Asper, dentist and member of Australian Parents for Climate Action, who loves his Hyundai Ioniq. Now, he loves the performance, instant torque, the fast acceleration, but he also notes zero emissions, low maintenance, and really low running costs. Once again, he's charging his car mostly from his rooftop solar. And then last of all, David Can from the Adelaide EV Association. He loves EVs so much he's got 3 of them. He said first up he bought a second-hand Nissan Leaf, thinking that it would be a kind of shopping runabout, but never actually used his petrol car again. Then for longer range, he bought a Hyundai Ioniq, which has done over 20,000 kilometres. And then more recently, he's bought a Tesla Model 3. And he notes just how little servicing and repairs those cars have needed as well. Now, not all of us are in a position to get an EV right now. So I just wanted to mention one thing that we can all do, which significantly reduces your emissions. It's pretty much the easiest way we know of to significantly reduce emissions. So if you switch your energy company or electricity company from a fossil fuel company to a renewable energy company, you'll approximately halve your household emissions. That works out to about 8 tonnes of carbon dioxide a year saved, which is about the equivalent of planting 120 trees a year, which we just love. So if this is of interest to you, have a look at the providers. Diamond Energy and Power Shop are both rated 5-star in the Green Electricity Guide. And we've got a link there to switch to Diamond Energy. I've done it. It genuinely only takes 5 minutes. So I can send that around afterwards to everyone. And then last of all from me, before I hand over to Michael, we would absolutely love you to come join our community. So we're putting out tips, we're sharing events, and people are just having a chat about what they're doing online. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, and please do check out our website. We've got loads of resources, videos, downloadables, local case studies to really inspire us about what's possible in terms of reducing emissions. Now, over to Michael Day. Michael, thank you very much again for your time. We really appreciate it. And I'll stop screen sharing and let you share yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you just share this screen, and I'm hoping you should be able to see my screen now.
Yes, perfect.
Brilliant. Thank you. So I'm Michael Day. I'm the National Treasurer of the Electric Vehicle Association and also the branch chair here in New South Wales. Planning to talk a little bit about AEVA, my journey through AEVA and electric vehicles, New South Wales incentives, EVs available in Australia, Charging 101, a little bit on vehicle to grid, and then finish with a bit of Q&A. So I've been with AEVA for about 12 years. I joined the organisation because I was planning to build an electric vehicle. That was the Toyota MR2, which I built about 10 or 12 years ago. It was a petrol vehicle when I got it, but I did buy it especially to convert to EV. And it took me about a year to do, and then I drove it around for about 5, 6, 7 years, I think. At which stage I added to the fleet. I bought the scooter, the V-Moto, which was a broken down EV. It was actually made as an EV, but it was broken at the time, and I bought it as a failed project, fixed it, and it's basically my daily ride. I use that most days. More recently, I bought the Lotus. That was another project. Had been in and around the club a little bit. Had failed, had broken. So I bought it with the battery broken, and I've since restoring it, so to speak, and I'm hoping to get it back on the road in the next few months. So AEVA was, the Electric Vehicle Association was formed in 1973, around the time of the OPEC oil crisis. And at that time, people were looking for other alternatives for fuel because it was hard to get and expensive. It was mostly built around people that wanted to convert cars to electric vehicles, like I have. And at the time, there wasn't the technology that we had now. So it's sort of been an interesting journey over that time, and has really started to blossom in the last little while. But what's come of that is the organisation that is built around the builders, more and more EV owners, businesses that are related to EVs, the charge stations, the people that provide component parts and the like, and the lobbyists and advocates. And naturally, because I've been in the organisation for a while, I'm not just a builder, I'm also now on the lobby side and talk to government councils and other like-minded organisations like yourselves to talk about electric vehicles. And our aim is to electrify Australia's transport sector more generally, every part of it. But of course, the part that is most accessible to us generally is electric vehicles. And we do that via the branches that we've got in each capital city, and then our national body is the lobby group and the organising committee behind it. So in New South Wales, we've actually got quite a strong builder community, which I'm obviously part of, and this is my build. This is my progress through restoring the Lotus back to a full electric vehicle. Like I say, I bought it off someone else and I am rebuilding it. It's in my garage right now. But more generally, the organisation AEVA is involved in community engagement. So we do presentations, we do shows, we do try drive days, we advocate electric vehicles in a very practical level, which is mostly getting people into electric vehicles, taking them for a ride in electric vehicles, and demystify electric vehicles, because at the end of the day, they're just cars. And one of the things that we do on the larger scale is the EV expos. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that in recent times, but next year we've got a couple coming up in Canberra and later in Sydney in the ICC. So you have to look out for our expos so we can go see, touch, taste, and get involved in electric vehicles in a very practical way, hopefully. That's our aim. So now from a New South Wales perspective, New South Wales right now, pleasingly, is one of the better governments, state governments, when it comes to the promotion of electric vehicles. It's a little bit all over the place from a government perspective. Federal's not very supportive. ACT is very supportive. Tasmania's got a good arrangements. New South Wales are coming along really well. They've got some strong advocates within the New South Wales government. The new Treasurer, as an example, has a Model 3. And so they're very supportive. And they recently come out with these incentives, which are based around the rebates. So for the first 2,500 EVs sold under that price cap, there's going to be $3,000 rebate. I think it starts at the 1st of September. I'll have a look in a moment. There'll be stamp duty exemptions for vehicles under 78,000. We'll have access to T2 and T3 lanes for a limited time. They actually define that, interestingly. And they're also looking actively at the charging network in two parts. They're looking at putting fast chargers on the highways and byways, but they're also looking at providing grants for chargers, destination chargers in regional Australia, particularly in and around tourism locations, to encourage people not only to use their EVs, but also to travel. There's also fleet incentives, because that's a great way to get the EVs out into the community and hopefully into the second-hand market. And also grants to regional businesses. So that's part of the vehicle network that they're talking about, 171 million network that they're looking at. And if you're interested, there's a lot of really useful information on their website. So they've got their electric vehicle strategy, the New South Wales electric vehicle strategy, which you can access online on their website, and quite a bit of useful information about what they plan to do if you're interested in going into a little bit more detail. and we'll provide the links with the pack at the end and in the chat. So one of the things we're asked about a lot is electric vehicles in Australia, and at the moment there is quite a pleasingly quite a few cars that are coming in to the country. I wouldn't say we're getting we're getting good vehicles. We're getting pretty capable electric vehicles. We're not getting the full range of electric vehicles that you would in the likes of Europe or bigger markets. And that's in part because our government is not terribly supportive. The industry is a little bit confused about our stance on electric vehicles. They don't see it as a market that's really encouraging electric vehicles. So that means that the manufacturers are putting their efforts into the bigger markets where there are obvious, it's being obviously supported. Norway is a prime example. About 90% of vehicles sold in Norway right now are EVs. So it's an obvious place where they'll put their efforts into providing the best, the most capable, the best range of electric vehicles. Saying that, the vehicles here on the list are what's available or will be available soon here in Australia, and we have got some quite good electric vehicles, and starting to get a real range of electric vehicles as well. If you're looking for the cheapest, that would be the Mini, but there's also some really super capable EVs. The Porsche is an example, which is a fabulous car. I wanted to go through a little bit of 101 on charging as well, because we get that question a lot about the types, the levels, the 101 on charging. And at the high level, there's really two types of charging. There's AC and DC. So AC charging is where you connect your car to the grid in one way, shape or form, either through a standard power socket, which is possible, or via dedicated EV cable. What that does is connects you to the grid, to the AC grid, and connects that to an onboard charger, which converts the AC current into DC, which is what the battery needs to charge. At the other end of the scale is DC chargers, which have what they've done is they put proper charge stations on the highways and byways. They're really big infrastructure, quite powerful, big, heavy devices, not really suitable for electric vehicles to be on board an electric vehicle, but given the high power, they enable us to charge the battery directly, charge it quickly, up to, I've heard, 300 odd kilowatts, even more than 150, meaning that you've got a lot of dedicated infrastructure that can charge the batteries quicker, and you don't need that heavy infrastructure in the car, which is adds weight and complexity and those sorts of things. So those are the two types of charging. And AC is typically what you'd have at home because it's easy to connect to your switchboard or to the pick up a power socket, as opposed to a DC charger, which is quite a heavy piece of infrastructure out on the highways and byways for rapid charging. The other element to charging is the charging levels. So typically level 1 charging is reasonably low power. That's where you actually do connect it into your power point. So it's about 10 to 15 amp power socket, which you can do at home, which you, will typically charge your car in about 5 to 16 hours, depending on the car and its capacity and all that sorts of things. Level 2 charging is where you've got a more powerful charge station, which is still something you'd have at home, but it's probably a 3-phase. It's a more capable unit. It'll charge your car at somewhere between 7 and 22 kilowatts, which will mean about 1 to 5 hours worth of time to charge your car from empty to full. And then we talk about the fast chargers, which are the DC chargers. So we often get some common questions when we're out showing our cars and talking about our cars. And one of the most common ones is, where does the energy come from to power our cars? Because we know that about 80% of the energy for our electricity grid is based on fossil fuels, 85% of it. About 15% of it at the moment is come from renewables. So it's true that our grid is relatively dirty. But that's changing. It has to change. We're actively working on it as a community, as Australians, to change the grid into a cleaner, more renewable grid. So that means that every year, as we progress, our EVs will get cleaner and greener. And you can't say that for petrol vehicles. They'll always be dirty, and they'll probably get dirtier over time too as they get older. Whereas electric vehicles, just because of the natural progression of the grid, will always get cleaner and greener. And if you're like me, I've got quite a large solar system, so I charge my car from my solar system, and power is essentially free and from renewables. Another question we get is how long do the batteries last? And it was true that in the early days of EVs, the batteries were not as capable as they were today and tended to wear out. It's not such a big problem nowadays. The batteries are very sophisticated. The chemistries are a lot different from what they used to be. And we're getting examples of vehicles that have lasted up to 2 million kilometers. These are Tesla taxis in New York and places like that, where we've got some very long-lived electric vehicles. And then there's also the opportunity now to start to replace the batteries in your electric vehicles. Nissan Leafs is an example. It's not really commonly available, but it is possible to replace the batteries, and it's in things like the Nissan Leaf, and it's going to become more popular as we go on. And then by the by, the batteries themselves can be recycled. The batteries in my conversions, for example, are out of a Nissan Leaf. They're secondhand batteries, but I'm also using them in my home as my home battery. So their EV batteries have a second life, or can have a second life. They're also very highly recyclable. They're about 80 or 90% recyclable. The lithium, the metals, the rare earth metals that are in batteries can be recycled and are recycled. Unfortunately, that's not really a thing that's happening now in Australia. We just don't have the industry large enough to do so. But it's something that will come, will have to come. And I know that there are organisations that are actively looking at that here. So it will be an industry. It will be something that we will have when the time is right. Another question we get is, well, what happens if you run out of charge? And the honest answer is that, well, with an electric vehicle, you do have to plan ahead. You do need to know where to charge when you travel on longer journeys. But worst case, you can plug into a power point. You can plug in just about anywhere, and I've done that. I've plugged into power points at shops. I've plugged into caravan parks and places like that. But most people don't have to do that. What they'd use is an app like this one, which is from PlugShare, which can tell you where all of the charge stations are in Australia and give you an idea of their capability, if they're in use, and where you need to go to find them. You can see there that the orangey ones are the Tesla charge stations. They've done a pretty good job of supporting their product and getting charge stations out there. But by and large, Australia is pretty well served with charge stations if you know where to look. So that's the thing, is you need to plan. And like I say, if worst comes to worst, you plug it into a power point and you go and have a cup of coffee, which I actually have done. Yeah. Two more things just as we start working towards vehicle to grid, because I wanted to talk about that a little bit, is that typically EV usage is relatively light compared to the size of the battery. For a typical driver, any vehicle, we travel about 40 kilometers today, 40 kilometers a day, which means you've got lots of capacity left in your vehicle for other things. And if you look at the typical EV compared to the typical household, then about, and if you looked at the amount of, I'll back off. I'll come from another perspective. If we were to convert every vehicle in Australia to EV immediately and make them electric, we would immediately double the grid. We'd double the load on the grid, just because of the amount of capacity that we're required to charge every battery is roughly equivalent to the power required to charge our houses and industry. So we would double the load on the grid. Some are concerned about that, but really and truly, the grid is designed to be scalable, and there are plans in place by the infrastructure providers to make sure that we'll be ready for that when it comes. And saying that, the uptake of electric vehicles is reasonably low, so it's going to be a scalable thing in any case. So yes, it will be a load on the grid, but when we get to that high level of penetration, it's not going to take the grid down. In fact, in many ways, it'll hopefully benefit the grid. And there are plans afoot to make sure that we're ready for it when we get to that position, even in Australia. The other is that a typical electric vehicle stores about 4 times the capacity of your average household, which is quite a large, a lot of capacity that could be used for other things. And that's when we're starting to talk about vehicle to grid for a couple of different reasons. A, there's a lot of capacity there that you can use to power your home. And B, it can be used for useful things like this pilot program, the REVS program, which I think it was in Victoria, where they were talking about using electric vehicles, vehicle to grid technology to protect homes in the case of blackouts. So giving yourself the backup capability to power your home in times of a blackout. But equally, it can be used for other things. It can be used to lob your peak power, so you'd be able to charge up during the day, charge your electric vehicle during the day off your solar system, and then run your house requirements off in the evenings. Or do some sophisticated things like backup if we start to band together and have virtual power plants and electric vehicles as part of virtual power plants, then we'll be able to, as a community, use that capacity to power our homes in the evenings, taking some of the peak requirements off of the grid. So that's a little bit of the 101 of electric vehicles. At this point, I think it's over to Ursula for the a bit more Q&A and 101. Thank you very much.